So, stop the share screen. Here we go. There. Well, welcome to week 5. I had thought that the first couple of weeks of this class would be kind of filled up, and then after that it would be kind of smooth sailing, kind of easy to do. But I'm finding it more and more every week. So, it's kind of the way it is, I think. You use up all you have, and God gives you more. It's been my experience whenever I try to teach anything. So today I thought we'd go talk about transcending boundaries. We talked last time about maybe fasting, giving up things, what that meant. That's sort of setting boundaries for yourself. Tonight we're going to talk about what happens when you do that. Then we're going to get into a specific kind of examen called the Discernment examen, and see how that works. And if there's some time, I'll look at some of the lectionary passages. Okay, so did anybody try the examens we talked about last week? Did you experiment with that a little better? Have you before? Anybody?
Well, let me just get it out there because I believe confession is good for the soul. I never needed Lent and what Lent means more this week. I mean, this week I've needed it more than ever and used it not at all. I stayed completely spun up on a project and did not attend to any of this. And I did so at my to my despair, I think. So there's the truth, ugly as it is.
Confession is an excellent thing.
But in this case, I really mean it, Michael. I am sorry that I didn't attend to it because I would be healthier physically and spiritually had I. But there it is.
Anybody else make an effort to try this?
I didn't exactly do the examen, but I did read the lectionary each day this week.
Cool. So you looked at the daily readings.
I did. I looked at the daily readings.
My bride's saying I need to let her in or something. Okay. Just a little reminder here. Lent is a season of preparation for letting God into your life to prepare you for better understanding Easter. And Easter is a very big concept, just a momentous thing in the history of humankind and the whole cosmos. So helps you get around a little better of it. Well, last week we talked about some examples of self-denial, things which you could abstain from or fast from. There's some examples: processed food, plastic, exercise, luxuries, busyness, judgments, constant media stimulation, video games, sports addictions, all kinds of things that you know are bad for you. We're talking about some of that. And so that really good fasting means abstaining from things, well, the things you should focus on would be things that come between you and God. And that's kind of the essence of sin right there anyway. When you do that, when you abstain or fast from things that come between you and God, it means you've chosen to let God address that part of your life. Okay? So you're kind of purposely letting God in a little bit. So how was it that you decided to do that? Did you want to get some God points? Was it peer pressure from your class here? Or peer pressure from anywhere else? Or were you invited by God's grace? Okay, think about that just for a second. Was it by God's grace, or were you kind of acting on your own? Our Reformed tradition tells us that faith is by grace. It's a gift from God. And really, a decision to fast or abstain should be also made by grace. If you're not doing this by God's invitation or His leaning toward you, then you really should kind of reflect a little bit on why you're doing this, why you're choosing to do it. Is it one of those reasons in the middle there? Sometimes there's kind of a fine line here between you acting by yourself and acting, being nudged by God somewhere. Takes a little discernment to do that, to figure that out. Give it some attention. When we fast and abstain from things that come between us and God, we discover that God can and will give you something better. Okay? It's what He's kind of in the business of doing. Something that's healthier for you emotionally, spiritually, and every other way. And more in communion with God. Are you noticing the sound effects there? I discovered how to do that, so I had to do it. Particularly with this one, kind of one of the things you want to get to is closer communion with God. Paul says to pray always, and that's what that means, being in communion. So your previous life, with all its interfering ways, will then be in the rearview mirror, looking kind of trivial and meaningless. And so this stuff that was interfering with your life and keeping you apart from God, now it's something that's in your past that's becoming more and more meaningless to you. So that means that which you chose to abstain or limit is no longer limiting you. Okay? You've stepped beyond to a life that's more fulfilling. It sounds good. That's as close to transcendence as we get in this mortal life. We're talking about God being transcendent. And when we do that, we're thinking He's outside of a time and space. He's not bound by those things. We are, but transcendence in this sense allows us to get beyond the boundaries that we had in our life, things that were limiting us. Okay. Make sense? Does it help you appreciate Lent? Okay, so the goal of doing something for Lent is for God to redirect and heal your body, mind, and spirit. So we're about done here with talking about what it means to polite, proper Protestants to think about what Lent means. So Any thoughts, questions, or ponderings about the Lent that you have kind of left in your minds?
Well, I don't know how. Anyway, this is not prophetic, but I really do like the idea of God redirecting us when we stop doing something that I guess he gives us the grace to recognize maybe we should not be doing or something. And I like the sound effects.
I think that's it for sound effects for tonight.
Oh, darn. Maybe you should throw a couple in just to see if anybody reacts. No, I like that. I like that redirection, and that he'll fill whatever it was with something probably more interesting, better, or I don't know what, because it's always a surprise.
Well, that's kind of the idea.
So I do have a question, Michael, and I'll do my best to keep it brief. And it's about this. It's the risk of bending the truth to fit your lies. I'm worried about doing that because right at the beginning of Lent, all of a sudden I found myself all spun up and driven into a bit of a project that that literally has me preoccupied, I would say 24/7. And it's significant. I mean, even at night, I think about, dream about it. It's on my mind all the time. But I think it's I do believe it's what I'm called to do. And so the question I have, is it within the realm of Lent, that Lent could be a time when that would happen? Or am I just being a jerk and not being willing to give up on a new passion? I don't know. But I am troubled by that, because when I say I am completely and totally, I can get Christine to back me up on this. I've not only been driving myself nuts, I've been taking her with me on this matter. And it just dawned on me now, maybe this is what I'm supposed to be doing during Lent. I don't know.
Pretty
If I-
responsive that, I think.
Yeah, if I could say something of it and speak directly to you, Michael, a friend of ours back in Cleveland, Ohio, once suggested that instead of giving up something like chocolate or whatever during Lent, like a lot of our Catholic friends were doing, Presbyterians were in the habit of taking on something new during Lent as a Lenten practice. And so our church back in Cleveland during Lent we would have extra things, extra projects, extra ways to get into Lent other than giving up something. He felt that it was better for us to take something on, including projects that consume us. So I think you're okay with that. I don't see that is completely wrong, but I've always felt that rather than giving up, I need to take on more during Lent to find that spirit of Lent within me.
Holy mackerel, I'm taking back my confession, because Becky, thank you.
Too late. Well, I guess taking on something might be kind of the mirror image of giving up something, because you do have to find the time. You are giving up something that way, something that you might otherwise be doing.
Christine is not as, let's say, forthcoming on matters as I am of this type, but she could give you quite a list of the things I've given up on that she.
And well, I want to now get into another topic that might actually help you in the same regard.
Becky, God bless you. Thank you very much. You got me off the hook. Thank you. Sorry, Mike.
We're going to talk about a specific kind of examen called a discernment examen. This comes from this guy, Father Armand Negro, who passed on a couple of years ago. He was a professor of philosophy and theology at Gonzaga for a while. He's been lots of other places. It says a biography I saw of him, he says he entered a Jesuit community over in Sheridan, which is just kind of west of Salem a little ways, in 1944. I don't know if there's still a Jesuit community there. I'd have to look. Anyway, he went from there and got several degrees and things and became a professor. And he came up with this particular examen that it's quite interesting. I think you'll like it. I gotta get rid of the. Okay, this is in the words of Father Armand himself. He says this is a simple prayer exercise, which can help you become more prayerful. Says I call it a discernment examen. It takes only 5 to 10 minutes. Spoiler alert, when you first start, it might take you longer than that. It says preferably in the evening, and it goes like this. Now when you, the 5 to 10 minutes, I think that gives you an idea of just how you should kind of have in mind of how hard you work at it in any one session. Okay. Don't take hours and hours to try to study it and think exactly what you're gonna do and say. That's really not the point. Doing it over time is probably more important. The step one is like the first step in any of these exercises. Just relax in the presence of God. Be aware of his loving presence with you and all around you. Okay, so just kind of get calm down. Relaxing. The point of relaxing, I don't think it's so much getting your muscles kind of loose as it is kind of getting rid of any extraneous thoughts. Anything that comes to your mind, just tell it to go to your waiting room somewhere and take a number. Sit and read a magazine or something for a while. And just, we'll get to you. Don't worry about it. And then put it out of your mind. And just get ready for a conversation with our Lord. That's step one. Step two, you'll like the way that he says this. Thank him for everything he has loved into your life since yesterday's examen, or however frequently it was. Loved into your life. I put that in bold print there because it's so good. Thank him for everything he has loved into your life. So whether you thought it was good or bad, God has loved it into your life. It comes with God's love. And if you start seeing it that way, I think you're going to find meaningfulness in your life. So that's step 1 and 2. 3, beg to be given the mind and heart of Christ to see reality as Jesus sees it. This might sound simple, and it's something Paul says in several places we should do. I think it takes a little bit of maturity to get into this. The heart and mind of Christ, to see reality as Jesus sees it. You're not going to see things as Jesus does. So you need to have him tell you how he sees it. You might, when you start this, you're probably going to tend to see things as you think Jesus sees it. You want to know how he really does see it. So this is step 3 is something to work on. Don't worry about getting it perfect the first time or the first 10 times or anything, that will come. Or 4. Print had to get smaller to get more of it on the page, and it takes a couple of pages. Reflect prayerfully over the day you had with the Lord. Check in on the we stuff, what you and Jesus experienced together. Compare that with the I stuff that you did alone. Jesus lives in us, so we can say, as Paul writes, I live not myself alone, but Christ lives in me. It's in Galatians chapter 2. This means in reality, your life is a we, you and he, not just an I. Okay? So he's there with you. And sometimes you're kind of paying attention to him and doing things with him. Sometimes we tend to kind of forget that he's there and kind of go on our own. As you reflect over the day, then see everything about which you can say we, even if you are not conscious of his presence at the time. But looking back at it, you think, yeah, he was there. I know he was. For example, you might say, we ate breakfast. We drove to work. We cleaned the house. We spent time with people. We rested. So on and so on. We watched television. We read the Bible. We did this. See what you cannot say we of, but have to say I. For example, I blew up at the kids. I cussed at the slow traffic. I rashly judged a man. I reacted selfishly. That kind of stuff. Now, I think we can see in these examples that these are kind of simple. But there's going to be a lot of things where you're kind of on the margin. You're not. It's not going to be real obvious. But like the rest of these steps, you're going to get better at it as you look at them with him. You'll get better able to discern. So he goes on to say, as we prayerfully reflect over our days this way, God sensitizes us to the ways in which he touches us and is present to us all during the day. In other words, he enables us to discern or to diagnose his touch from all other movements and urges in our lives. So he's going to help you learn how to discern when you're acting with him and when you aren't. So that finishes up this. The focus of our attention is on God and his presence, not just on us. That's why I call it a discernment examen. This helps us become more aware of his presence and more peacefully be and work and rest with him in the days to come. You can see how that's going to work, right? You become more and more aware of when you're in communion with him and when you aren't. And you're going to want to be in communion with him more. Step 5. He starts to sound a little bit Catholic here. It says, renew in love your sorrow for ever disappointing or offending our Father. And say to him, God, my Father, I offer Jesus, your Son, to you who lives in me. And with him I offer you myself and all creation. To please and praise you, to love and thank you, to expiate for my and everyone's sins, to purify the good we do badly, to make up for the good we should have done but failed. Okay. So this sounds kind of Catholic. Catholics are more concerned about for making confession formally and often, I think that gives you, really means you have to spend less time in purgatory or something. They're kind of different that way. But this is something that can help us as well, I think. Certainly can't hurt you to confess what might be getting in the way, and this, God can help you find that. So if we talked last time about giving up things that come between you and God, God will help you figure out what those things are. And he promises here, if we let Jesus redeem our day and our whole lives in this way, he will. I think that's something we perfectly proper Presbyterians can endorse. Step 6, accept an invitation from our Lord to spend some time alone with him in prayer tomorrow, or however, whatever frequency you're doing this. Make it a date with a definite place and length of time, and accept any invitation he gives to repair any damage or behave better the next time we face the kind of situation in which occasions our fall, kind of stuff we mentioned in step 5. Okay, so make the next appointment, what this says. Step 7, end by praying our Father, or I suppose you could pray in another way if you want to. Okay, that was certainly a good one. These steps make some sense. It's a little more involved than the kind of generic examines we talked about last time. Some more about an examen kind of in general. When you're first learning how to do this kind of thing, you might want to follow the 5 steps or the 7 steps. To begin with, while you're getting the hang of this. As you become more accustomed and get kind of experience with this, you won't need to come up with any kind of name for your process. So instead of saying, well, I'm going to go do an examen now, you might say, I'm going to go have a conversation with God. Okay? You and God are going to know the best way to speak. And it might be different every time. Okay? One of the things that'll develop out of this is, God's Spirit will help guide this kind of decision. Again, deciding how to modify these things shouldn't be just something you do because you think, oh, I don't want to spend so much time, or I've got whatever reason you have. Try to let the Spirit of God guide what you're doing. Let's see what kind of let me just tell you that next week, I think I'm going to present something about a kind of a mystical writing. It came up in, I think, the 14th century. It's called The Cloud of Unknowing. Anybody read that before? No? Cloud of Unknowing. This, as we go through these examens and the lectios and all the other spiritual exercises that you can learn, it seems like there's a lot of steps. And if you read a lot of the mystics, they had kind of steps to go from kind of basically learning about God to what they call perfection, which is like sanctification. They had ways of guiding you through that, but it's easy to look at those and think, well, gosh, that seems like a lot of to do. Can't God just kind of save us? It seems like in the Gospels that Jesus made it a whole lot easier than that. And the beauty of the cloud of unknowing is, yes, it is a lot easier than that. It's still not you doing it. It's God doing it, but how you can kind of develop this and not having to stress yourself about all the different steps you think you have to go through. That'll be next week. And it's wonderful. So I hope you'll do that. Well, I thought I'd play this another example from Pray As You Go. It takes about 8 or 9 minutes, so I think we can do it. Go.
This review of the day is a prayer of looking back. It's not just reflecting on what has gone wrong, but a wider look at what has happened during my day. The good things and the bad things. Trying to see where God has been moving. So, the first thing I need to do is stop. No matter what I am worrying about, no matter what's on my mind, stop. God is with me. Quiet perhaps, but present nonetheless. God is here with me now. I remember that God has created all things. Everything I have is a gift from God. Is there something that I would especially like to give thanks for today? Now, I ask God to shine his light into my heart, so that when I look back over my day, I may be able to see God working in the things that have happened. So that I may see more clearly, I ask God for that light. Now I begin to remember through the day, starting from when I woke up. I remember the people I met and the things that happened. On the whole, was it a good day or a bad day? Was it a normal day? Or was it unusual in some way? Who did I meet during the day? Did I come across something surprising? A long-lost friend? Or an awkward old enemy? Does something special come to mind? A beautiful sunset? Something I was told? something I saw on TV. In all the things that have happened, how did I feel? Was I joyful, or sad, or angry, or frightened? Maybe I felt great and was really happy. Can I remember how I felt as the day went on? And what was the cause of those feelings? Did my mood change during the day? God guides us through our moods and feelings. Normally, the way of God is, in a deep sense, peaceful and consoling. If your day was disturbed, or if you were uneasy, can you sense where that uneasiness was coming from? Like a sailing boat buffeted by many different winds, we are affected by many different feelings. The better we come to know these swirling breezes, the easier it will be to see the perhaps subtle movements of God in our lives. An important question to ask now is, what can I be proud of today? There will be things. If you can't think of anything, then you haven't looked hard enough. What happened today that I can be proud of? Whatever it is, I give thanks for this. But also, did I turn away from God during the day? Maybe I turned a blind eye when it suited me. Did I recognize God in that homeless man, that annoying child, or that spiteful old woman? When I look back on this day, can I recall any way I may have shut God out, turned my back on him, ignored him? I ask forgiveness for anything I may have done to ignore or hinder God's love during the day that has passed. And I ask especially for the graces of healing and strength. The final part of the prayer is to look forward to tomorrow. We are people of hope. Let us remember that God will be with us then. What am I expecting to happen tomorrow? What am I looking forward to? What are the dangers and difficulties I might face? Where might I most need God's help? I ask for that help now. And I ask that I may never forget that God is with me always, present in all things, gently guiding me towards fullness of life. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
Here's some more resources for you. If you don't need to copy these down, I'll be sending you these slides. You can get more examples of examens on Pray As You Go, that site there. Another source of examens is this from the Loyola Press. This is just in writing. They don't have the sound for it. So our own denomination has it again in writing on sound. Presbyterianmission.org. There's a thing called Lectio 365 that you might want to look at. This is similar to Pray As You Go. So instead of just giving you the questions, they actually do some of the prayers. You might look at that. And all of these have apps on, you can get on your phone if you want to do it that way. Okay.
Well, I really like what we just heard. It would, for me, I would like to have that in writing because he had so many specifics. Unless I went through and listened to it again and wrote down all those prompts, because I like very specific things to help me move through things.
Mhm.
So that was excellent.
I think it followed the same kind of 5 steps that we talked about last week, but threw in a lot of questions that were very similar to what we talked about this week. So, yeah, that was good stuff. They have several examples on that website there. Well, I think
Can I, Jane, if you go to the link that Michael showed on
Oh,
Pray As You Go, and if you look, once you go to it, if you look down at the bottom, I'm talking about on the computer, not the app, and it'll say Examen 3, and then you'll see some icons. The last icon says text. If you click on that, you can get what you want.
it
It's
pays
almost
to
over.
know people that know what they're doing.
Don't ever confuse me with one of those folks. That you could harm us all. You know what I'm saying?
But that would be something we can note during our day then, as we're going through an examen.
I have to say that was terrific, and I realized that's actually, if I were to think about the past week, which has been a corker, I've really enjoyed it, but it has been anyway. If I parked that at the end of each day, I would be a better human being. I'll just say that. So.
Yeah. Well, I had Michael Talbert knows about this, and Christine, I'm not sure where she went, but we had homeless.
She doesn't feel well.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Nothing serious, but she's a little nausea. That's all. We just got in the house from driving down from Portland. That never serves her too well.
Well, yeah, I think she has some motion, maybe cars anyway.
Yeah.
But
The driver's awful too. That's another problem.
again, something to note. She so we had homeless families in our basement all week, and that's why I wasn't wherever I was supposed to be last week. But it was so incredibly interesting, and it would have going through all these things would have been an interesting exercise in bringing up my awareness of a lot of things. Anytime you work with families and kids, a lot comes to surface.
I think I'm just playing around. Do you all see the lectionary readings on the screen? Does anybody see them?
Yes,
Okay.
Michael. Sorry.
Yeah, we went through them in church this morning.
Good. Well, you did. You probably read a lot on them. Our pastor dwelt on the Ezekiel. He said his pastor called it Zeke the Freak. And, there's a lot to say about it, about how God can take what seems to be really lifeless and just has no meaning at all, and can put life and meaning and spirit and flesh and just breathe something good into it. Basically to fulfill his will, his promises. So I think the important part about this is that not only can God give you life, but look at this guy Ezekiel. He had absolutely no reason to believe that anything good would happen here. But God told him to prophesy these bones anyway, and did it anyway. Okay? There's no reason to think anything good would happen. But God tells you to do something, so you do. So in that way, it's connected to our Lent study.
We had a chancel drama on this text this morning. Normally the drama is written by our granddaughter Willa. This time it was written by our daughter Ellie, and it was a paraphrase of this interaction. Ezekiel was talking to someone else about what God was telling him to do, and there was another person then that was kind of reacting to that, and Like, is God going to call up a zombie army? Is that what this is going to be? And that got a lot of good laughs. And what was particularly beautiful in the way I experienced it was when Willa and Ellie began to talk about, no, this is a metaphor for God's people, you know, and I was like, oh, it's just a metaphor. And it reminded me of the Book of Mormon at the end of that play, the Book of Mormon, where they celebrate that, you know, a lot of this is metaphor. So I don't know. I also had the unique experience of reading this a second time as I visited a parishioner who's had a stroke, and she can't form words right now. The stroke was just this in the past 24 hours, and I was in the ICU with her and spent some time, and so I read this passage to her, and then at the end I started to sing these dry bones, you know, the foot bone connected to the ankle bone, and by the time I got up to the thigh bone, Shirley laughed out loud. And I just it made me laugh, it made me smile, it made the nurses smile. And Shirley can't communicate with much more than a nod of a head or the movement of an eye. And but she laughed at these dry bones going to dance around, because I think she remembers seeing me dance down the aisle during a postlude. So but Becky had an aha moment with this text. How did you see it?
Well, I'm very literal, and I didn't see it as a metaphor.
Oh, you really thought it was a zombie on me.
Yeah, well, you know, I didn't understand, but the way it was in the play, they talked about the people in the people that had been taken to Babylon, and they were dried out.
Yeah.
You know, their faith had dried out, and they were like dry bones. And this was a hope for them. And I guess sometimes it just takes a children's story, a skit, to help me understand some of those things. I mentioned that to my daughter, and she says, "Mom, you've always been very literal." So evidently, this is something I have a problem with.
A zombie army, I can't unhear that. I never thought of that before. But
the other thing that I guess I'm kind of very sensitive to it, to the biblical understanding of when life begins. It's, you know, we have a lot of folks that talk about when does life begin? And if you notice, the bones stood up and they had sinews and muscle, or, you know, muscle and then skin, but there was no breath in them. And it was when the holy wind blew into them, and the breath came into them and they lived. Throughout the Bible, that is the origin of life, or that is the beginning of life, when God breathed into Adam. And when Elijah brought a child back to life, he breathed into her. When Jesus brought a child back to life, he breathed into her. So I thought that, well, that's another one I need to put in my file as to the biblical understanding of the beginning of life.
yeah, it's kind of complicated. It's also related to blood a lot. So there's nuances all over the place. Well, let's look at some of the others. I was kind of amazed that our pastor dwelt on this one, because the gospel reading is from John, the raising of Lazarus. So how can a preacher stay away from that? Let's kind of look at that. It's just too long for one page. This is where your word comes to Jesus that Lazarus is ill, and he waits for a couple of days. But then he goes there. Word comes that he's died on the way. Or Jesus acknowledges that he's died. So he gets to Bethany. It says verse 17, when Jesus arrived, he found Lazarus was already dead in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, 2 miles away. Many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to him, rather than wait for him to get in the house. The house is full of mourners. So she went out to have a more direct conversation. He says, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. And a few minutes later, Mary says the same thing. But even now, I know God will give you whatever you ask of him. Okay. Well, so forth. You're familiar with this, I'm sure. People get puzzled on why is this account of Lazarus only in John's gospel? Why isn't it in all of them? Because it's such a major happening. Seems like it ought to be something really important to everybody. I have a theory. Theory is that as they approached Bethany and they understood that Lazarus had actually died, he'd been in the grave 4 days. I think the disciples probably thought, well, Jesus is just going to go in, he's going to see Mary and Martha and console them for a while. And probably best we don't all go. That would just add to the stress of it. So they probably stayed out in the outskirts of town. And Jesus went in. Now either just John is the only one that went with him, or somehow John knew Lazarus later. Somehow he got the story. And the rest of the disciples, especially the apostles, probably didn't want to admit that they didn't go there. They probably didn't see it. Okay. Just my theory. Now this raising of Lazarus is really second only to Jesus' own raising from the dead, his own resurrection, to as a witness to the life-giving power of God through his grace. Okay. So, pretty important story. I noticed in verse 37, I think it was 37. Yeah. Some of the Jewish authorities that were there, some of them said, could not he have opened the eyes? He who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying. Well, so I think that pretty directly refers back to what we read a week or two ago about where he healed the blind guy, put a little mud in his eyes and went and washed in Siloam. So this was still something that was upsetting to them. They still thought it was kind of scandalous that he would do this. Okay. But again, they couldn't arrest him on this day for sure. Well, I think this story also encourages us that he wanted to have this conversation with Mary and Martha we have the verse that says Jesus wept, shortest verse in the Bible. Verse 35 says, in this version, says Jesus began to weep. I'm not sure if that takes it away from being the shortest in the Bible, but it's still pretty close. Anyway, he knew what was in the hearts and minds of Martha and Mary. So I think we should be encouraged to know that he wants to have conversations with all of us. That he's interested in what we're feeling, what we're thinking about. He's ready to have a conversation with you. So you can pick up on that. Well, it's after 8 o'clock. I think there's a lot we can say about the other passages too, but that's we can leave that. Any other thoughts or impressions?
I have to share one that our pastor Sheila today, she read, and the dead man came out and he was still bound by the linens, hands and feet. And she, I think, accurately deduced that he hopped out of, if his feet were still bound,
Yeah, you'd have to.
he hopped out. Can you, and like, that's kind of cool. It was like, wow.
And that's why we have bunnies for Easter.
You're right. I was just thinking, hey, hippity hopping down the lane, but Sheila also mentioned that Jesus asked the community, the people around him, to roll the stone away. Now he's able to raise Lazarus from the dead. He probably could have commanded the stone to move on its own, or just got up there with his super skill and rolled the stone. But he asked the community to participate in this in rolling the stone. And at the very end, although Jesus has raised Lazarus from the dead, he is still bound by the linens, the accoutrements of death. And Jesus instructs the community to unbind him. So not only in that unbinding, for me, is like us letting go of the notion that Lazarus was still dead and unbinding him and appreciating that he's alive. And so while Jesus is disappointed with Mary and everybody's lack of faith on this, at the same time, he is engaging and trying to get the community to Mary and Martha, and get them to understand what's happening in front of them and to participate in it.
So you had Sheila Sullivan today.
Yes. And she will be ever remembered by me as the one that reminded me that Lazarus hopped out of the tomb. Easter will never be the same.
I've seen her a few times at churches where I've kind of gone in on YouTube to watch.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't ever met her in person, but she seems pretty effective witness.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow, between the zombies and the hopping
Yeah.
zombie
So we had the
rabbits,
zombie army and
gee,
Lazarus hippity hopping
Hippity
out of the
hopping.
tomb.
dear.
Oh,
Uh,
all right.
Wow. Great visuals.
Yes.
Well, she grew up in a Muslim society, so she's witnessed the binding of the bodies and the burying, and so she was able to create that mental picture. I was struck the same way. It's a mental picture I will never be able to let go. It was just amazing how she brought that to life with Lazarus hopping from the tomb.
Very well put, Rick. To life.
Brought to life.
Yeah, right.
All right. well,
Thank you, Michael.
Well,
Thank you so
thanks to everybody for the texture and the visuals. Zombie sound effects, Mike, next time.
I'll work on that.
And Michael Talbert, good luck with your passionate obsession, and may it continue.
Yeah. You're
I'll be on.
mute. You're mute.
Thank you, Lord, for the presence today and for giving life to our bones and to our tissues and to the activities that we engage in for your service. Lord, stay with us always. Amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
I'll just say quickly, I'm working on trying to, not just by myself, but a number of us, on trying to improve the care coordination of homeless when they leave the hospital, so that they don't get just dumped back onto the street, or as has been the case a couple of times on our church steps. And so it's seems useful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sounds
Yeah.
useful.
Thank you.
See you all next week. It'll be good.
Well, tell them where you're going to be, live from where.
Oh, I'm going to Seattle to watch the opening series of games for the Mariners.
Oh, wow.
So I'll be broadcasting from Seattle next week.
Wow. Pretty snazzy, Michael. All right, bless you all.
All right. Good night.
All right.
Oop, not recording.